for your health insurance, where no one goes to the doctor because it costs an arm and a leg, and then they take an arm and a leg
To
because you
be
have
fair,
diabetes and
I was going to say because they have gangrene.
both.
One of those or the other. Hi there. You're listening to PopPartisan, the podcast that brings real-world issues into pop culture universes for a non-court-ordered reason. Is Homer Simpson a Democrat or a Republican? Would The Little Mermaid's Ariel be a vocal environmentalist? How much medical marijuana does Frodo Baggins toke after the Return of the King?
And does he share it with the Fellowship?
Yeah, it's a fellowship. Of course he's going to share it. Either that or he turns into like his evil, like dark-eyed version that's like so pissed off that Frodo has the ring. That would be terrifying if you're
That's
Snow.
when you take salvia.
That's what he takes. So basically, we're taking all of your favorite pop culture indulgences like Lord of the Rings, and we're trouncing them with a healthy dose of real-world anxieties.
So buckle up.
I'm Sam. I work but mostly live in Washington, D.C., which is a very apolitical place, so I might not really know what I'm talking about. But I've worked in offices on Capitol Hill, as well as issue-oriented nonprofits, usually before they realized I was there and was asked to leave. But the more important thing is that I watch a lot of TV shows and movies, and I like to say I read a lot of books too, but, you know, I act like I read books. That's the important thing. I own books, so that's like half the battle, right?
Do you hire consultants to look at your bookshelf to have literature placed strategically?
Yeah, and sometimes I pay them to sit by my bedside and read the books to me. It's usually like The Runaway Bunny or The Little Engine That Could or Corduroy. It's a really mellow
Okay.
way of going to sleep. It helps with all the drinking, right?
So they tell me.
Now, who the hell are you?
I remember briefly kicking your ass at one point, but I've had a little too much to drink in between there.
Too broad. Somebody who kicked my ass.
Fair enough. Well, I'm Anthony. I currently am enjoying a blissful fall in Texas. I have various degrees hanging in my room that tell others, and myself especially, that I know how to read. But not to sound like a total jerk off or rip off my colleague, but I do enjoy watching TV shows and movies as well. And also happen to be a massive political junkie. I just don't advocate for anything at all.
Soulless bastard.
I stopped caring. So in today's episode, we're discussing Pokemon, and more specifically, how Pokemon are like guns. So, Sam, did you pack your 6-shooter?
I have all six. I have 6 balls dangling from my person. Is that what you mean?
We'll go with that, yes. Much like 6-shooters, Pokemon is usually a team of 6. So we're making connections all over the place, aren't we?
What was your first game, or what do you remember? What your first memory of Pokemon was?
My first, I guess, memory would be back in kindergarten. We had these behavioral cards, and for good behavior, you would get a blue.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were gonna say behavioral cards to like read, like it says like this person is sad, this person is angry. So that to be like, and they did those with Pikachu.
No, we would get good behavior, which ironically was a blue color, and I got a string of blue in a week. And my parents got me a Pokemon show at Blockbuster as my reward for good behavior.
Oh, do you think we need to explain what Blockbuster is to people?
It's like Netflix, but you actually have to go to the store and pick out a movie rather than sit on your couch. So there, I explained it.
There's still a Blockbuster in existence in Oregon or
Oh,
Alaska
God
or
bless them.
somewhere.
I
People
guess they
like the
do.
novelty. I also think it's like it's got to be a place where there's like not good internet, so it's like it might be more practical
Yeah,
just
good
to go to
point.
Blockbusters.
So what about you? What is your first memory?
My first memory of Pokemon was getting Pokemon Gold version, and I got the limited edition Golden Game Boy Color that had Pikachu and Pichu on it. That was primo, and I just remember being like so amazed by it. Yeah, I played the hell out of that. Game Boy. It's still floating around somewhere, and it's probably not worth what it would be in mint condition, but who cares? Now I remember I picked out Cyndaquil as my starter. I don't know what other Pokemon I even had in that
Mm,
first version of the game, but really the rest is history. They suckered
mhm.
me in for life.
So my first game was Pokemon Red version. I remember picking up Squirtle as my first starter, and I like the water. So
Statistically, the best starter in first gen.
yes, they are. The water starters always seem to be the easier of the bunch, and I always loved Blastoise.
I always go with grass starters, and that's not to preemptively spite you. I just
Uh,
always go for grass starters.
is that indicative of a bigger problem?
Maybe. No, no,
No
no
comment.
comment. No comment.
But yeah, no, I did red, so and I went all the way up until platinum. I think was the last one. Yeah, platinum.
Oh, so you haven't played a decent number of games.
No, I haven't.
You stopped at fourth gen.
Yes.
There's been 8 generations of Pokemon.
Good lord.
Yep. Wait, do you know how many Pokemon there are? Like,
700?
there's almost 900.
Oh. Well, I clearly missed out on a lot.
Actively are missing out on a lot. No, my favorite starter was always Turtwig because it would evolve into Torterra, which would
Mm.
literally be an Ankylosaurus that had a continent on its back.
Mm.
Of course, I'm going to go with that. Literally evolves into another dinosaur. And I think Torterra is my favorite Pokemon. Way too many choices, but for you, I guess it's an easier decision because your view of the Pokemon world is halved. So, who do you
Yes.
think your favorite is?
So I think in terms of starters, it would have to be Blastoise. And then I think for non-starters, it'd probably be Tyranitar. I just always loved his lore, and he always just seemed to be this epitome
Yeah,
of
the
power.
pseudo legendaries,
Yes, yes,
especially where you have to get to level 55 to evolve it.
yep. But I really enjoyed Tyranitar.
There's a Pokemon in Generation 5. You have to evolve it at level 61. It's the Fire Moth Volcarona, and I could probably be wrong about that level where it levels up. I'm
Hmm.
sure people will tell me I'm wrong because people like doing that. Anyway, yeah, my favorite game was Diamond 2. I think it was in part just
Hmm.
because of Torterra and the team that I could build around it. But it's actually really funny with Pokemon Diamond version. I didn't tell my parents
Hmm.
that I was buying it or that I even had a Nintendo DS. So for the longest time, I never heard what
Mm.
Pokemon Diamond's soundtrack even sounded like, just because I was so accustomed to
Mm.
covertly playing the game without any sound that I thought even like making the Nintendo DS a little bit loud and I would just be punished for
I
it.
think that's a good way to segue to our central question, what we want to really discuss on this podcast, which is Pokemon an allegory for weapon proliferation? We're trying to make this pop culture and reality sort of blend
Yeah, we should
together.
clarify that neither of us, so we're fans, but we're not, neither one of us are experts on Pokemon, nor are we experts on armaments and their proliferation. We just sort of want to see where the things rhyme, where they sound similar, and explore the coincidence.
That's exactly right. Sam, you want to get us started off here?
Yeah, I want to start by talking about the notion of Pokemon being utilitarian throughout the Pokemon world. It's really common throughout the games for Pokemon to be used as tools, either physically moving things, surfing you across the ocean, flying you from point A to point B, and doing some other absurd thing that I probably can't think of off the top of my head.
Basically, the humans are lazy, right?
Basically that humans are lazy or that humans are industrious. From the games and the show, it's often you often see people use Pokemon as a tool, often used for fighting. When you start a game, you're a Pokemon trainer and you're off to go on this journey, and to collect Pokemon, you're supposed to be cataloging your Pokedex, but you're also using Pokemon for conflict, seemingly almost all the time. And so I always thought that this was interesting because obviously there's that utilitarian purpose for using flying Pokemon to fly you from point A to point B, but there's also this notion of Pokemon as this constant armament in the background. not armament in the background. What am I trying to say? As this constant method for force, should somebody choose that. Second Amendment advocates here in the United States like to talk about how their guns are used as tools. And there's a very interesting parallel, I think, between the proliferation of Pokemon used for that kind of aggressive attack purpose and the way that people who are big gun advocates seem to view their weapons on their holster.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong though, most of the Pokemon, at least in the games and in the anime, they seem to be a very, how do I say this, gentle nature. They don't seem overtly aggressive.
Like friendly seeming.
Yes, yes, yes. And it seems like the humans are driven co- to spur on this sort of
Oh, to
conflict.
like make them into tools of aggression.
Too much of a leap.
No, I think there's something valid there
Mm-hmm.
because it's the notion of using something as a tool of aggression where it's not intended as a thing of aggression in the first place. So it's interesting that there's that
Mm-hmm.
parallel that you can teach a fluffy Jigglypuff to self-destruct. And of course in the anime they always make it seem like much more destructive, like those battles always take out entire city blocks.
Yeah, it seems very expensive to own a shop in the Pokemon world
Yeah, just hope that their insurance policies are
with
good.
all that insurance that you probably have to yeah. Oh, sorry, we didn't have you covered for Jigglypuff self destruct. Sorry, you're on your own for
But I
this.
thought my insurance policy was comprehensive.
We didn't anticipate a Jigglypuff self
Oh,
destruct. Sorry.
but um,
Um, good
but
day.
I'm a small business. I okay. Yeah, and then in Generation 5 we have N, who is the leader of Team Galactic. There's too many criminal teams. But he has this very interesting philosophy around liberating Pokemon, allowing some kind of coexistence to happen between Pokemon and humans, which I find very interesting because it's very, taking the negative human influence out of the status quo world and incorporating in a lot more of that like naturist element and allowing things to sort of exist as they would.
It's funny you mentioned that, and we'll probably touch on this in that's not on accident. There's more to it than just an an liberation of the Pokemon side by side, but it's a theme that you see in lots of Japanese inspired animes and manga that there's this sort of coexistence between nature and man that's throughout all the.
And seems to incorporate a much more inclusive means rather than using Pokemon, inclusive means to Pokemon, rather than using Pokemon as a tool to a definitive agenda, like Team Magma and Team Aqua do with Groudon and Kyogre in the third generation of games in Ruby and Sapphire. Question: do those count as
Mhm.
crime teams or are they cults? Because I gave a lot of thought to that when I was writing the copy for this episode,
Ooh.
and I realized they're cults too, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, I think it is a definitive shift. Because in the previous two games, right, you had Team Rocket, and they were the quintessential bad guys. With Team Magma and Team Aqua, they're trying to change the world through what are essentially deities of land and water, and they worship these uh, beings. And there's almost like a ritual,
Yeah, these overly powerful.
right? Yeah, and there's this ritual, right, that you have to awaken these beings before they can, do their thing. So yeah, definitely, I do agree with your premise there that they are cults.
And it's interesting because there's so much of this siphoning nature that there's also that they use Pokemon for like this nefarious purpose, but there's also another side to the Pokemon universe where human beings make new Pokemon.
They do, and this is something that hasn't. This is something that has been with the Pokemon universe for since the very first generation. Now, With regards to man-made Pokemon, you have your environmentally inspired Pokemon like Grimer, Muck, Voltorb, Electrode. These newer generations with I forget the name, but I call it the Top Hat Weezing.
Oh, Galarian Weezing. Yeah, the one that's part fairy type.
Yes, yes, the Galarian Weezing. They're truly man-made, and what I mean by that is that the environment has influenced these Pokemon. Yes, without man being there, they they probably wouldn't exist, but they still have their own sort of someone didn't walk out one day. It's like I'm gonna go make a muck, right?
That sounds like it's code for something.
Right, yeah. But they aren't truly man-made in how I sort of think of it. I don't know how Magnemite is not one of those, or how Magnemite is a naturally
Magnemite's
occurring
definitely
Pokemon,
not.
but it's one of those things I look at. For Magnemite, it's like a naturally occurring Pokemon. I don't understand why, but who am I to question the lore?
Voltorb I always thought was a good example of like a battery or like just an energy bomb where it's like it has a very clear like chaotic purpose that makes it very analogous to weapon. Like you wouldn't be walking through a forest and just see a Voltorb
Mm-hmm.
roll up to you.
Mm-hmm.
That would just seem very, very out of place. Yeah.
Right, for sure. But when I think of man-made Pokemon, I think Mewtwo. God is the probably the first of the man-made Pokemon that was bred for, well, for all intents and purposes, conflict. Mewtwo gets his own little origin story. He's born in the lab, and he becomes quite powerful. And he's unique because he has this human-like quality.
Yeah, it's basically like Nietzsche for kids.
Yes, Nietzsche for kids. I like that. But yeah, he was man-made for Giovanni, and he was a weapon. I don't entirely know the purposes or the end game for Mewtwo under Giovanni, but he was very powerful. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm out of my depth with
Oh,
this
clearly.
generation Pokemon, but Genesect, man-made, but they pulled them from a fossil, and
I don't know
then
whether or not the Pokemon Company ever confirmed it, but there was something where they were discussing how Genesect was a modified version of a Kabutops, the fossil Pokemon that you get in first generation. And the parallels when you look at the
mm,
Pokemon themselves are very, very stark.
mm,
And it strikes a lot of like intrigue around the use of Pokemon for a much more nefarious purpose, like turning a horseshoe crab into the Terminator, so to speak. Although Terminator might not be exactly correct, like a
mm, mm.
spaceship.
So you look at these Pokemon, and can we rank them via calibers of destruction? Mewtwo and Genesect are legendaries, or maybe I know Mewtwo's legendary and Genesect's
Mythical. They have a whole other word for it. It's mythical Pokemon, yeah.
mythical. Okay. Well, something new every day. So yeah, you look at Mewtwo and Genesect, and they do possess powerful abilities to destroy. But for the most part, they seem pretty tame in terms on a caliber of destruction level. You, I kind of lump them in with that being a Charizard, Blastoise, Dragonite. They can cause destruction, but it can be pretty much contained
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form. They do have a lot of powerful abilities that can level any house or city block. I know Tyranitar has the ability to move mountains, but even these kind of pale in comparison to a few other Pokemon. I'm talking about Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza, Dialga, Palkia, Giratina.
Yeah, the ones that basically are gods.
Yes, and they have just this indescribable amount of power. Groudon can turn the world to a desert. Kyogre can drown us. Rayquaza can negate those two. And then you have these trans-dimensional beings that control space, time, and shift through dimensions. And you're telling me that they just willingly go into a Pokeball of a 10-year
Maybe
old?
Maybe an 11-year-old, not a 10-year-old. They're picky about that kind of thing. But it's interesting too because
Fair
there's
enough.
precedent throughout some of the games of there being an actual Pokemon war that was fought between the Kanto region, which is basically the Pokemon analog to Japan, and the Unova region, which is the Pokemon analog to America. So that's the first generation games fighting the fifth generation games. And it's been floating around for some time, even before Unova existed,
Hmm.
that there was a major conflict that left the world so scarred that people like Professor Oak are counting on 10-year-olds like you as the protagonist to go out and recollect data on every animal that exists or every Pokemon that exists in this world now. It's the reason why Gary has no parents, why you, Red, don't have a father, why there's all these weird like snippets that you hear from NPCs when you just go up and talk to them, and why there's just relatively few adults in the Kanto region too.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I never put two and two together while playing. Obviously,
Yeah, do you remember Lieutenant Surge?
yeah, I know he was the first.
Third gym in the
Yep.
first game. There's I can't remember which game, but one of them he actually says electric Pokemon saved him during the war, which is just a terrifying visual to have in your head. And but the point is that the parallels between weapon and Pokemon are certainly there, or Pokemon at least is like assistance to like offering assistance to humans that are at war.
Hmm.
But how does that translate back to let's talk a little bit more about how that translates into using Pokemon as like these tools of war or tools for destruction.
I think in terms of some of these stronger Pokemon, they are powerful in and of their own right, and it's hard not to look at them and be like, yeah, no, that would be a perfect weapon system, right? I think in terms of a good imitation of this would be Victini. Now, again, out of my depth with, this sort of lore, but my understanding about Victini, it's close to victory, right? Their name is Victory.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they're typing.
The sprite of Victini is also doing the victory sign too.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I've never played it, but Victini, Victory, but also they're a psychic and fire type. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm looking at this individual, they have the ability to, the lore says this Pokemon brings victory. It is said that trainers with Victini always win regardless of the type of encounter. That seems to be pretty
Yeah, it's a trump card kind of Pokemon, right?
similar to that of a nuclear weapon. As maybe Pyrrhic of a victory as it would be, a nuclear weapon is useful in really tilting the balance of power.
Wait, did you say Pyric or Pyrrhic?
Pyrrhic victory.
Oh. I thought you were saying Pyric victory because it's a fire Pokemon. Pyric rather than Pyrrhic. We're history majors. We know this
Mm,
stuff.
so they say.
So, what do you think the parallels between the Pokemon War and real wars that we've experienced here have been? Like, what war do you think we come closest to that's similar to the Pokemon War?
So I think in terms of what we're seeing in the Pokemon world is a complete shift in terms of how society is viewing conflict. There isn't very many military, there aren't very many military symbolism in that.
They don't live in a police state in Kanto.
That's good point. Yes, no police state. There seems to have been society that is tired of conflict, tired of war. And I think if I'm thinking about this correctly, I would probably look at something like a post World War II or a 30 Years War vibe for a sort of analogy between Pokemon World and our sort of reality.
Yeah, I would agree, especially since World War II is had such a strong impact toward like shaping the modern world that it's very very similar just because it was so devastating. And it's weird and it's kind of sad that that kind of impact is tantamount to that level of or that kind of violence is tantamount to that kind of change, but it definitely has that similarity. And I wonder whether when they were designing the game that helped to set the context for making a richer world that they would illustrate in the Pokemon. universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's funny that we bring up World War II right after Victini, because reading about Victini a little bit more, they are a psychic fire type, which, if this metaphor is going to work based off the war, it produces an infinite amount of energy. Talking about Victini within itself, and can share it with others by touch. This thing is like a nuclear.
Much like large bombs that we've dropped on places before.
Exactly, yes. And so it seems like this little tiny thing can be a stand in for a nuclear bomb, and that's kind of terrifying.
Oh, easily.
And I think it's funny that they're a psychic fire type, because I'm sure having a nuclear weapon dropped on you not only burns you, but also the psyche part of it can cause a lot of issues.
Okay, so we know that there's a lot on this topic, and Anthony and I probably have not even started to scratch the surface. Let's be honest, like there's way too much that we could discuss when it comes to this kind of thing. And we're going to admit to you at the end of all of this that we're not actually smart. We're just Reddit smart. Then again, you could have probably gotten the clue from when we talked about not reading books, or me not reading books. Anthony's still a little defensive about that. But if you think we left out something important, which we definitely did, let us know on Twitter at PopularPartisan, and we will heed your comments. We might not immediately do anything about them.
Oh, I definitely won't.
You definitely won't. I actually think I need to give you the login to Twitter. You're good at Twitter, right?
Yeah, I do tweet the twats sometimes.
I don't understand it. I keep trying to do a reblog, and it doesn't work. Reblog.
It's for people whose brains are completely broken, like mine.
Oh, so that means there's still hope for me.
It's fading fast.
So before we end the show, we're going to revisit the central question that we had at the beginning of the show one more time, and each will give our thoughts to close out the random exposition that we've offered throughout the episode. So is Pokemon an allegory? Can Pokemon be an allegory for weapon proliferation? Anthony, I'll start with you. Because there's so many of us, so I'm going to start.
In this roundtable discussion that encompasses only two of us, I think it is a good, well, maybe not good, but there are definitely some parallels between weapons proliferation and Pokemon, if you want to dig deeper into how that influences the youths, as they say.
Yes.
The youth, and tendency towards violence. I don't know, but I do think it's a good allegory for weapons proliferation. If you want to dig deeper into it, obviously on the surface level, it's just a bunch of dudes or a bunch of kids with a bunch of monsters.
They could be dudes, though. Clearly, you didn't watch Good Burger.
They could be dudes or women.
So I would agree that it is an allegory, but it's very contingent on like how you look at it. So clearly the entire game isn't written, or the entire Pokemon universe isn't written as a way to teach about weapon proliferation, but there's something important that you could learn about mankind's use of certain armaments, or mankind's use of just natural resources when it comes to antagonistic and militaristic purposes. And there's probably a lot more stuff that I just don't know about because I'm not a war historian, but it'll be interesting to do a revisit in the eventual future, probably not too distant or eventual future, probably the future, bringing on a war historian and just revisiting the concept with them. So I would say yes, but it's also yes with the caveat of we're cherry picking the hell out of the franchise. So we're probably not
for sure
looking at it from like, I couldn't give an objective yes, but like from this very cherry picked vantage point, I would say yes. Okay, so that's it for this episode. We hope you all enjoyed it so far. I did. I think Anthony did. No, he didn't. He's nodding no aggressively.
I did, yeah. It was just enjoyable.
Oh, now he's walking toward the door. Okay, that's it for this episode. Tune in next week, next episode, and we'll discuss Star Wars. So thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
PopPartisan is hosted and created by Sam Gerard and Anthony Tarzi. Logo by Emily Turner. PopPartisan.com designed by Joe Gerard. Music by Andrew LaVogue. Go find Andrew on Instagram, Spotify, and Bandcamp. Thank us later. Make sure you subscribe to PopPartisan wherever you get your podcast fix.